The movie starts with a woman named Chani, who shares some history about her people on the planet Arrakis, a dangerous desert world. Chani herself is a Fremen, the native tribe of planet Arrakis, whose life is very tough. She explains that her planet was taken over by the House of Harkonnen, who aim to harvest spice, a substance found on the desert's surface. This spice is a source of energy that can be used for space travel with just one jump. The Fremen tribe keeps trying to drive the Harkonnens away from Arrakis because they are harsh to the native people. However, they have not succeeded because they are outnumbered and outgunned. Recently, the Fremen heard news that Padishah Emperor Shaddam IV, who rules the known universe, ordered the House of Harkonnen to leave Arrakis. They will be replaced by a new house that will also harvest spice on Arrakis. On the planet Caladan, we see Prince Paul of House Atreides having breakfast with his mother, Lady Jessica. Jessica is a member of the religious order of Bene Gesserit, which has super abilities like mind control and voice. House Atreides then holds a welcoming ceremony for Padishah Emperor Shaddam to officially grant them the spice fields on the planet Arrakis. It turns out that House Atreides will replace House of Harkonnen. Paul's father, Duke Leto, along with his guards Gurney Halleck and Thufir Hawat, receive the planet Arrakis. Here, Duke Leto senses something odd about Emperor Shaddam, suddenly appointing him to take over Arrakis. However, Duke Leto must accept Emperor Shaddam's decision, whether he likes it or not. After the ceremony, Paul meets his friend Duncan Idaho, an elite warrior of the Atreides, who has just been ordered by Duke Leto to go to Arrakis first to blend in with the Fremen tribe. Paul asks Duncan to take him to Arrakis first, so he can see the situation on the planet himself. Duncan refuses, of course, because it would be too dangerous for Paul. Paul then tells Duncan about his dream of seeing Duncan killed in a battle on Arrakis. Duncan tells Paul that a dream is just a dream. Later, Paul visits his father at the Atreides ancestral tomb. There, Duke Leto reveals the reason Emperor Shaddam appointed the Atreides to Arrakis. The Emperor wants to provoke a war between the Harkonnens and the Atreides. Duke Leto says he plans to join forces with the Fremen to fight back during the war. The next day, Paul practices martial arts with Gurney, who is skilled in knife fighting. Before the practice starts, Paul activates a shield that can be penetrated by an opponent's attack if Paul moves too slowly. They begin their training, but Paul, still a novice, struggles to master what Gurney is teaching him. Meanwhile, on the planet Giedi Prime, the leader of the House of Harkonnen's army, Beast Rabban, meets with his superior, Baron Vladimir. Rabban informs Vladimir that Emperor Shaddam has chosen House Atreides to take over Arrakis. Vladimir then tells Rabban that this move was planned by Emperor Shaddam to bring down House Atreides because their power is growing strong and nearly rivals that of Emperor Shaddam himself. Vladimir also reveals that Emperor Shaddam has ordered the House of Harkonnen to eliminate all members of House Atreides once they arrive on the planet Arrakis. Meanwhile, the leader of the Bene Gesserit comes to test Paul, who is a direct descendant of the Bene Gesserit. At the time, Paul was asleep and dreaming about a mysterious woman who turns out to be Chani. Paul is still unsure about the meaning of his dreams, but he feels that each dream depicts a future that will happen. Jessica wakes Paul and instructs him to meet with the Bene Gesserit leader, Reverend Mother Mohiam. Before meeting Mother Mohiam, Paul is checked by Dr. Wellington Yue, who reminds him to guard his thoughts in front of Mother Mohiam. Afterwards, Paul meets Mother Mohiam in a room. She then puts Paul through the Gom Jabbar test, which involves a cyanide poison needle and a pain-inducing box to assess Paul's character. Mother Mohiam asks Paul about his dreams and whether they sometimes become reality. Paul responds that he is not sure about his dreams, as none of them has yet come true. After the test, Mother Mohiam scolds Jessica for giving birth to a son instead of a daughter, as it was against their rules. Jessica then suggests that Paul might be the Kwisatz Haderach, the prophesied savior believed by the Bene Gesserit to bring blessings and prosperity. However, Mother Mohiam is skeptical and warns that Paul's abilities are not fully developed and he might die in future tests. After the Bene Gesserit leave, Jessica notices Paul standing behind her, indicating that he had overheard their conversation. Jessica explains to Paul that the Bene Gesserit have spent hundreds of years trying to produce an unmatched Kwisatz Haderach. The Kwisatz Haderach is characterized by having visions of both the past and the future. A little while later, House of Atreides has now arrived on Arrakis. As Paul, Duke Leto, Jessica, and the others disembark from the ship, the local people suddenly call out Lisan al-Gaib towards Paul. Jessica explains that Lisan al-Gaib means voice from the outer world. Once they reach the House of Atreides camp, the guards begin to close all doors because the temperature on Arrakis can reach up to 190 degrees Celsius. Jessica then recruits several servants from the Fremen tribe and becomes interested in a Fremen named Shadut Mapes. Shadut sees in Jessica and Paul the characteristics of Lisan al-Gaib and gives them a dagger made from the spice of the fang of Shai-Hulud, the giant sand sandworm that lives in the desert of Arrakis. In Giedi Prime, Baron Vladimir is visited by the Bene Gesserit, who inform him that Emperor Shaddam will send additional troops to help Baron Vladimir fight against House Atreides. The Bene Gesserit also request that Baron Vladimir not kill Jessica and Paul, as they are part of the Bene Gesserit. The next day, Duke Leto holds a meeting with his senior officials to start the spice harvesting project. Thufir Hawat then takes Duke Leto to the Director of Infrastructure used for storing spice. However, Duke Leto discovers that House of Harkonnen has sabotaged some of the infrastructure needed by Duke Leto. Duke Leto plans to bring this issue to the Imperial Transition Arbitrator, who has been living on Arrakis for many years. This arbitrator, Dr. Leet Kynes, is also an ecologist. Shortly thereafter, Duncan arrives, having successfully blended in with the Fremen tribe for 4 weeks. In the meeting room, Duncan reports to Duke Leto that the Fremen indeed have an unmatched warrior spirit. They also have a special force called Sietch, who live in caves beneath the desert. Duncan then introduces the leader of the Sietch, Stilgar, to Duke Leto. Stilgar advises that the residents of House Atreides should not leave the city except for spice mining, and he also warns them to be cautious while mining, because Shai-Hulud will not hesitate to consume anything standing on the desert. The next morning, Duke Leto meets with Dr. Leet Kynes, who invites him to inspect the first spice mining operation carried out by House Atreides. Before heading to the mining site, Kynes provides a special garment called a stillsuit, made by the Freeman, which protects the body from extreme temperatures. The stillsuit also absorbs sweat and recycles it back into the body to prevent dehydration. Once prepared, Kynes leads Duke Leto, Paul, Gurney, and the others to observe the mining operation from an aircraft. Upon arriving at the location, Kynes discovers that the mining vehicle, a sand crawler, has attracted the appearance of Shai-Hulud. Duke Leto immediately dispatches a transport to move the sandcrawler to safety. However, as the transport attempts to lift the sandcrawler, one of its anchors breaks. For the safety of everyone, Duke Leto decides to land his aircraft to rescue the mining workers stranded on the sandcrawler. As Paul steps out to guide the workers to the aircraft, he suddenly feels dizzy from the spice dust in the air. During this moment, he has a vision of Chani. As Shai-Hulud approaches, Gurney quickly snaps Paul back to reality and rushes him back to the aircraft. Everyone watches in awe as the Shai-Hulud devours an entire sandcrawler. After the incident, Paul is examined by Dr. Yue, who informs him that he is allergic to spice, but it is not life-threatening. Meanwhile, on the planet Salusa Secundus, we see the Emperor's forces being prepared for an attack on House Atreides. These troops are called Sardaukar, known for their brutal efficiency. That night on Arrakis, Duke Leto suddenly wakes up from his sleep, feeling that something is not right. He goes to the central room and finds the servant Shadeout lying on the floor, bleeding profusely from the stomach. At the same moment, a dart strikes Duke Leto's back, paralyzing him. The perpetrator is Dr. Yue, who has betrayed him because his wife has been taken hostage by House Harkonnen. Dr. Yue reveals to Duke Leto that he has disabled all communications and shields on the planet Arrakis. He then places a false tooth filled with poisonous gas in Duke Leto's mouth, which can be used to kill Baron Vladimir Harkonnen. Shortly thereafter, the forces of House Harkonnen and the Sardaukar launch an attack on House Atreides. Gurney and his troops are overwhelmed and unable to save any of their combat units. Duncan, who had just woken up, is immediately attacked by Sardaukar soldiers, but he manages to kill them and then rushes to Paul's room to save him. However, by the time he arrives, Paul and Jessica are already gone, having been captured by Harkonnen forces. The Harkonnens plan to dispose of Paul and Jessica in the desert, leaving them to die from radiation exposure, as a way to make it appear as if Paul died trying to escape. During the flight over the desert, Paul uses his voice power to command one of the soldiers to remove the tape covering Jessica's mouth. Jessica then uses her voice to compel the soldiers to attack each other. However, the ensuing chaos causes the aircraft to crash in the desert. Meanwhile, Duncan is desperately trying to locate Paul and Jessica to ensure their safety. Moments later, Dr. Yue brings Duke Leto before Baron Vladimir Harkonnen. Dr. Yue then demands that Vladimir fulfill his promise to release his wife once Dr. Yue's task is completed. However, instead of keeping his promise, Vladimir kills Dr. Yue, cruelly telling him to join his wife, indicating that he had already killed Dr. Yue's wife. Realizing the extent of Vladimir's cruelty and knowing he has nothing left to lose, Duke Leto bites the poisoned tooth, provided by Dr. Yue and releases the toxic gas. The gas kills everyone in the room, including himself. Shortly after, medical personnel arrive and discover that Baron Vladimir Harkonnen is still alive, though he requires serious medical attention. Meanwhile, Paul and Jessica, now hiding beneath the sand, find a box containing 2 still suits, Duke Leto's ring, and a letter from Dr. Yue. Exposed to spice once again, Paul experiences visions of a bloody conflict in which he leads a rebellion alliance against House Harkonnen and the Emperor's forces. After this vision, Paul and Jessica emerge from the sand. They reunite with Duncan, who informs them that Duke Leto has died at the hands of House Harkonnen. Duncan then leads Paul, Jessica, and Kynes to a terraforming station inhabited by several Fremen tribes. But their refuge is suddenly interrupted by an attack from the Sardaukar troops. A few Fremen attempt to resist them. Duncan sacrifices himself, fighting against the Sardaukar to buy time for Paul, Jessica, and Kynes to escape. Tragically, Paul's dream becomes reality as Duncan is killed by the Sardaukar forces. In the midst of chaos, Kynes instructs Paul and Jessica to flee while he leads the Sardaukar away into the desert. After ensuring that Paul and Jessica have escaped, Kynes deploys a device called a thumper on the sand surface, which is designed to summon Shai-Hulud. However, moments after setting the thumper, Kynes is ambushed and fatally stabbed by 3 Sardaukar. In his final moments, Kynes frantically strikes the sand, triggering the arrival of Shai-Hulud, which devours them all. Paul and Jessica continue to be pursued by the Sardaukar troops. In a desperate bid to escape, Paul decides to steer their aircraft into a sandstorm. Inside the storm, Paul experiences another vision, this time of a Fremen man who gives him some advice. They eventually emerge from the sandstorm, but not without damage to their aircraft's wings, which causes them to crash into the desert. With their aircraft no longer operational, Paul and Jessica set out on foot towards a nearby hill to properly equip their still suits. Once suited up, they continue their journey on foot towards a location believed to be inhabited by the Fremen. They adopt a specific walking technique designed to mimic the natural sounds of the desert, thus avoiding detection by Shai-Hulud. Upon nearing their destination, Paul realizes that the sand beneath his feet is firm, a condition that inadvertently reveals their presence to Shai-Hulud. Recognizing the imminent danger, Paul urgently instructs his mother to run to the nearest rocky hill. Racing against time, they manage to reach the safety of the hill just before Shai-Hulud could reach them. They watch as the massive sandworm pauses, seemingly considering Paul for a moment before turning away. Shai-Hulud then heads west, likely drawn by the vibrations of a thumper being used elsewhere. Not long after Shai-Hulud departs, several Fremen emerge from the rocks. Among them is Stilgar, who recognizes Paul. Stilgar informs the other Fremen that they should not harm Paul. However, one of the Fremen, named Jamis, who also appeared in Paul's vision, refuses to accept Stilgar's directive and instead challenges Paul to a duel. Paul accepts the challenge, ready to face Jamis in combat. Before the duel with Jamis, a Fremen woman approaches Paul, and it turns out to be Chani, who has consistently appeared in Paul's visions. Chani gives Paul a dagger made from the tooth of a Shai-Hulud. As the fight commences, Paul successfully defeats and kills Jamis. Following the duel, Stilgar leads Paul and Jessica towards the Sietch. During their journey to the Sietch, Paul observes someone riding a Shai-Hulud. Chani then tells Paul that from this point forward, everything truly begins.